Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves two tracks from an act named Big Sexy. The first of these, titled She's Leaving Early, She's Working Late. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen on Spotify here. Get that art up on the screen and we're going to listen through this track as well as the other from start to finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's go, let's do it. What do we got? I like that subtle organ in there.
When she's not texting on the phone, she often sits on the couch all alone, gazing at the cornfields with misty eyes, staring at the stalks like she's hypnotized. She tries to tell me that we're doing great. I know that girl is not being straight. When it comes to loving young couples, never hesitate. She's leaving early, she's working late. Now our bedroom has turned cold. Romance is a burden, too tiresome and old. I was once a lover on a nightly call. Now I'm on hold, I'm in a permanent stall. She tries to tell me that we're doing great. I know that girl is not being straight. When it comes to loving young couples, never hesitate. She's leaving early, she's working late.
Fantastic transition to the guitarist here.
My dream is to have a son, teach him how to plant, fish, and shoot a gun. I'll shape his heart with love and grace, teach him to walk at his own pace. Maybe she thinks I'm naive about his sins, but my shooting eye is as good as it's ever been. Next time she goes clubbing and stays out late, my shotgun will determine her lover's fate. She tries to
Oh,
tell me that
okay. I'm going for that angle then.
I know that girl is not being straight. When it comes to loving young couples, never hesitate. She's leaving early, she's working late. She's leaving early, she's working late. Leaving early and she's working late. She's leaving early, working late. Leaving early and she's working late.
I mean, there's a hell of a heel turn in that middle part, eh? When it goes into that kind of major and then the minor turn there. Almost getting nostalgic for a moment there, realizing how twisted everything is. I get the feeling that this track is about someone who initially just had doubts about the relationship. You know, the woman is clearly unhappy with where they're at and they're struggling with the situation they're in. But then the inference, I suppose, later on is that there is another man involved and that the next time, well, when they're going to F around and find out, right, effectively. And they talk about teaching him to sort of fish plant and how to shoot a gun. So I assume there's something about a child involved here. So ultimately, I'm kind of wondering if it's coming down to a child being involved and a woman maybe taking her position for granted as a mother and maybe, you know, trying to find another guy for a better sort of like grass is greener situation. And we're just not going to have that in the end. You know, it's more complex than first assumed. There is an interesting journey that we go through with the singer here. We have a vocalist who's very comfortable in the head and chest voice, that the vocal team is proficient, but we also have someone who is unafraid of having a little bit of angst and push in their voice. It's not a harsh vocal performance by any means. They don't try to commit to the bit of being really furious with this person. I think that's a rather kind of tactful, kind of classy way of approaching it. We kind of dance around it to an extent where it's very pleasant to listen to if you're not paying too close attention to the lyrics. But then if you try to pay attention to it and kind of like take it in your stride, you are left feeling like, oh crap, oh wow, okay. So it's almost like it kind of tests whether you're paying attention. I like the overdub vocals in some parts, like the 2-minute 30 part, just as a nice sort of side paddish kind of element there, a little bit of extra kind of sort of pizzazz in the mix. And it just is a nice glow that contrasts with the more sort of straightforward sort of main vocal lines. And we navigate our legato technique well, so honestly, it's just a really solid performance on the mic there, very, very comfortable. The track itself at 3 minutes 10, there seems like there's a lot going on. I think part of it is we play around with the different major and minor leanings and the different progressions and sections. We have a really wonderful sort of succinct guitar solo there that's got a great sense of presence in the mix and explores its fretboard well. But it's also more about the journey we take with the storytelling as well as the other instruments surrounding it. I think the organ, for example, sounds fantastic. It's a wonderful kind of accompaniment and sort of foil with a kind of a spiritual, like if we talk about relationships in the organ, the kind of church and marriages and stuff like that falling apart, it kind of relates sort of texturally there. In fact, there's several lead guitar passages, and I just think they're very kind of wistful and work as like an alt lead to the main parts. And I think that you can't just take for granted that even when a track is right within that sort of 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, that people will sort of be interested in hearing that entire progression there. There's such a lovely kind of gentle presence to those acoustic guitars or sort of steel strings that you have, or even clean guitar tones in the verse sections that coincide neatly with the hand drums for a more sort of like acoustic tone. Is very kind of gentle. And it's an interesting decision there. It's a fun, different texture to the kick, snare, and simple patterns that we have in the full drum kit. It's just nice to have a separate type of like, again, of percussion to add variety to the composition. And there's like the kind of honky-tonk kind of piano parts in certain parts, playing through the blues in sort of like pentatonic modes as like tails to certain parts. They're invoking a sense of the sadness that we're feeling about the situation, what it's come to. And the staccatos that we have in other parts on the right hand add a nice sense of tension and pace to it. I think the basses work well to reinforce both the chord progressions on the guitar patterns as well as some of the organ sort of key parts, but also it's just a nice sort of contrast to the vocals in the upper range there, formulaic, in the lower end of the spectrum. And I just think also the kit is foundational in the way it approaches its main sort of quarters, eighths, and sixteenths. It's just really easy to listen to. And it's nice and solid and reliable with a mixture of different ride height and sort of like simple patterns there. You're never left kind of wondering what's going to happen next. That it's just great to have that kind of chemistry between individual musicians and to know they can play their stuff well. Even going for like rim clicks or like side sticks whenever you need a less kind of intense tone on the snare. In fact, even in that sort of like dedicated solo section, there's like a kind of balladesque kind of melodic kind of approach to it there. We have some really wonderfully sort of like, it's got a fantastic tone to the lead guitar there. It's got an ambience that's very sort of gentle, but it also invokes a sense of the passion that we feel towards the situation, for better or worse. It's not trying to shred for the sake of being virtuosic or kind of like impressive. It's trying to play again a similar meter to we have in some of the vocal passages. And the use of like timbre and other sort of sublayers and bits of air candy is just adding extra texture and timbre to the mix. Ultimately, quite an accomplished composition with seamless transfers and a lot within that 3 minutes, a lot to appreciate. Thematically, I think a lot of this is more sort of paying attention to the lyrics and then hearing where the chords go. There's a sense of drama with some of those final chords or some of these sections there, which infer a tense sort of like movement there, or that there's a bit of a sting in the tail there. And I think that works well even when you've got the kind of major leanings. There are even some maybe parallels or something like that occasionally, add a bit of sort of suspense to it or to kind of surprise the listener, which I think makes sense considering the surprises that we're getting from the storyteller or what they're experiencing, I suppose. But yeah, the performance is tight without a note out of place, and you're just left with the studio recording, the mixing and mastering, where when we consider what's on display here, it's just, I reviewed a lot of Big Six's work in 2025, it being 2026 now, but like up till mid, it's just great to hear that they're continuing to release music and that they've just made leaps and bounds over that time. The studio quality is commercial grade, no complaints in regards to the way the vocals are presented, great EQing and sort of compression on those fronts, a bit of reverb on the mains and sides. The various guitar tones and textures captured eloquently in the mix. The EQing is handled. There's no resonant frequencies between the guitars, bass, keys, or organs, tambourines, or anything else. It's a tightly glued mix, but there's compositional sort of dynamic range that's totally fine, and it's nice to allow without pumping, so the bus compression limiting is handled. It probably seems like I went in a bit hard on this first track. I'm trying to sort of like do each song analysis individually and then an overall part, but I feel like if you don't hear me say anything applicable to the second track, you can assume that's the same kind of comment. Because we've got Here We Are, track number 2. Got the art up there for you as well. Technology is amazing, isn't it?
A love-struck couple with a dream. Two simple, wide-eyed country kids that you picture in a magazine. We held hands, we were never alone. Our hearts beating rhythm with the joy of a soldier coming home. Then we danced a silly little two-step by request. Two Huckleberry Dairy farmers who were 7 times blessed. We held hands, we were never alone. Our hearts beating rhythm with the joy of a soldier coming home.
Great thunder to those tones. Are those keys or strings or like a synthesizer? Very cool response with the guitars here.
But we held on to a thread of grace through every storm. We found our place. Here we are, two tearful lovers with the wind. Two lonely golden ages who still long for each other's kiss. We held hands, we were never alone. Our hearts beating rhythm with the joy of a soldier coming home.
You know, usually I do these reviews, and like a lot of the time people want feedback on their tracks, and sometimes people just want them to get the YouTube upload, and either are fine or both is fine, you know, porque no los dos. But it's a situation here where with Big Sexy, I don't really know if they need someone telling them what they can do better, because at this point in time they sound commercial grade across the board, and it probably just sounds like I'm glazing, but I'm not, like, genuinely. Like, well, what would you say to them? Hey, you could have more guitar solos there, you can have more sort of compositional diversity there, you could do a better vocal performance. It's its own sort of ambiance and mood. And the reason that before that I said that technology has come a long way is that it used to be incredibly difficult for independent musicians to be able to get this kind of quality with their productions, but we just got into this time and age where it's just so much easier, and I'm just thankful for it. I think that when musicians make the most of those possibilities, it's a very beautiful thing. And so, welcome to my little mini conclusion of the second track. Here we are. I think that it's a song about two lovers who, just two country kids who came together and we had this massive sort of infatuation with one another, like the real love, you know, the real thing. And then the wind's coming in, the wind's sort of sending them off course. I wonder whether, you know, like something tore them apart and then they came back together eventually. If I don't misconstrue that, I think if that's the case, it's beautiful. I think either way, it's a wonderful sentiment. And it's a very interesting turn from she's leaving early, she's working late. I like that we're exploring different angles of relationships. I mean, I know it's hashtag relatable, but also it's just cool to know that we can approach these kind of, I feel like because it's without saying, isn't it? Great subject matter, relatable. People will be able to get behind that. Similar comments to the vocal performance in the previous part. There's just a sense of intimacy that comes into play with how delicate some of the vocal parts are. And part of it's due to the mixing, the way it's been produced, but it's also down to the fact that we have good sort of control of our vocal dynamic range. I think also, to be fair though, part of it is also the wonder of those those harmonies that we have throughout a lot of the verse sections, the thirds or something like that. They're wonderful, and they do kind of sound like people going through the happy and sad parts, the major and minor tonalities of their own existences. I like that there are some uplifting moments there where the vocals come up, even with the winds and stuff like that. We're kind of accepting that maybe the winds had to come in order for us to maybe appreciate how well we came together, but I'm also kind of 50-50 on what the track's about at this point, even after listening through it. I just would need to listen through it again, you know. It's just when you try to listen through everything at once, you kind of maybe miss stuff. So still, nonetheless, wonderful vocal performance there. The harmonies are gorgeous, and I like the overdubs as well. There's no complaints there on my part. And the expression typically matches subject matter, I think. There were, again, more twists and turns like the previous song, but in a way which typically made musical sense. Structurally, at 4 minutes, it had an extended solo section end in amongst these verses and choruses, and I just feel like that was a sensible decision. I was kind of expecting the guitar to be a bit more sort of predominant, but like, we didn't have that here. There were like these keys or synths in that midsection there, which were very kind of like wistful and kind of meditative, like you were kind of thinking through the ether that you were stuck in. Like these memories that are revisiting, maybe we're sort of stuck in a storm of some kind. Maybe we needed a while to come up. But I think if you're going to make a 4-minute track, you don't want to have too much sort of like monologue in case, as opposed to being able to have your other wonderful instruments that you have within the arrangement maybe take their turn. If you can tell the story that you need to and then come in with the winds afterwards, and it's like, oh wait, we're coming into something else, what's happening here? It makes it seem a little bit more sort of like sophisticated. What we had going on at the start with the keys there, that kind of balladesque kind of like left and right hand accompaniment part, like, you know, splitting up the triads there. The bass coming in at the same time as that organ with the flutter and sort of tremolo on it there, splitting between the parts of the frequency spectrum in different octaves, just filled out the frequency spectrum really neatly. And it just immediately set you in the zone of what the track could be about. And you had these kind of little kind of ride hits as well with the onbeat and syncopated parts, which were like, oh, okay, dun 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 dun, oh, well, we're popping back into that, or we're going back into it. And it kind of seemed like we were getting ready for a big adventure. You know, when we did get into the main sections, the guitarist, piano, bass, and drums continued to be supportive of the main vocals being the focal point, but there are other sort of trade-offs. Even like sort of subtle sort of sub-leads, like some of the crispy, arpeggiated kind of guitar parts that we had around the 120 mark there. Just a nice little bit of color and flavor that complicated those triads a little bit. And around the solo at the 145 mark, we kind of came away with that with another sort of more sort of mainstream, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, it's a kind of solo that you sort of you'd expect it for like a ballad format like this, country ballad format like this with a bit of rock involved. Even though, of course, that section I'm talking about does lead into that synth section there. So it's extended, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. And there's an inherent sort of like sadness and state of depression with some of those key parts there. It's very sort of dreamy and almost sort of ethereal, but it's kind of, yeah, it really does just kind of sit there. You do wonder what it's about. And then the trade-off we have between the vocals and the guitar takes kind of lets you know, hey, we're still not completely divorcing ourselves or separating ourselves from the guitar leads that we had previously, but kind of having the vocals be equal parts to them, and I just thought that trade-off was really neat. And there were lots of cool as a closing note, sort of drum fill and tom patterns and stuff like that, that just kind of had a nice sort of bounce and thud to them. It was a really tight percussive performance on top of all the various guitar ideas, as well as the drums and the keys and the the organ. We had similar makeup, I think, instrumentally to the previous song we reviewed, but they were clearly played in different ways with different purposes. I think there was a subtle elegance in a lot of the major and minor components we had with the chord progressions thematically there. We were trying to indicate a sense of loss potentially, but a gratitude regardless of the fact that we managed to get back together in the first place. And just generally, again, another solid instrumental performance without a note out of place. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering, this one is commercial grade as well. I feel like these are the same comments I'm going to put in the track analysis, overall analysis section, but just 2 for 2. I suppose if I was going to be charitable before I move on, I would say that like those organs, just again, they sounded like church organs, and it was just considering, I suppose, the communion or the connection between these two people and their reunion on like a spiritual as well as on a literal level. As I understand it, I just think it's a wonderful thing. And you kind of needed to get that kind of analog aesthetic within that to sort of make it more believable, I think. You couldn't have necessarily chosen like a digital synth or organ or something like that. It would have just sounded a little bit kind of unusual and kind of dissonant. We're going to talk about these tracks more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of these 2 tracks from an act named Big Sexy, titled She's Leaving Early, She's Working Late, and Here We Are. Now, I've given my individual thoughts on these tracks as part of their own sort of mini conclusions, but in this section I'm just going to give my overall thoughts on these 2 tracks as a whole, and as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my overall thoughts on it from a general listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think these 2 tracks are about? I think these 2 tracks are about not trusting the partner you're with when they behave badly, and the kind of to and fro you have with that, trying to figure out whether you can trust them or not, and then getting the shotgun ready for the inevitable. And then here we are, where I think we initially were together, and then something tore us apart. We came together again, and we were never going to be split for long, unless I've misconstrued that, in which case it's kind of 50-50 at this point. Whether it's the main sort of lead vocals or the side parts or the backing harmonies or like the kind of dual kind of ideas we have, dual melodies we have, and here we are. We had a singer who clearly was very comfortable in his vocal range, head and chest voice, great use of legato technique as well as scales, understanding the fundamentals of music theory and composition with use of majors and minors as well as blues and pentatonics and other sort of like chromatic passages. We knew how to express ourselves in a way that made sense for the subject matter we were discussing. We could be vulnerable or quieter when we needed to, and we could push a bit more when we were calling out. You know, a great sort of dynamic control there, and just ultimately just really nailed it on that front. And typically, again, the expression made the subject matter. So the vocals were absolutely handled. The tracks themselves at 3 and 4 minutes respectively are well fleshed out with no filler within them. We had a variety of different verse and chorus patches as well as instrumental breaks and little kind of moments to appreciate the various sort of guitar, bass, drum, key and organ parts, whilst also several guitar solo sections, main guitar solo sections, and also like a key section like in the middle of Here We Are that was extended. That was unexpected on my part, but I kind of dig that. Very occasionally I might look at tracks like these and go, with the amount of subject matter we had in the vocals, these could have been even shorter without those leads, but I feel like they were poignant and respectable, primarily because they were played well with a variety of different sort of like hammer-ons and bendy parts. We showed a good sort of like control of our technique, both in terms of the ornaments we decorated them with and just simply knowing the right notes to play within their respective scales and modes. But it's also that they weren't an all the time thing. We didn't just shred for the sake of being able to play guitar really well. We played tastefully in a balladesque format that typically was a similar kind of meter to what we might have been doing vocally. And I appreciate that we were trying to have it as an alternate voice. That is one of the fundamental ways to solo, after all. The organ part that we had in Here We Are, I'm still undecided about that one. It's primarily because I don't think I have the words for it. It sounds like it's trying to create more of an environment rather than tell you a story with its notes. There are gentle changes between minors and sort of neutral and major notes there that are maybe invoking the sense of the twist and turn they're on the ship moving towards whatever horizon they're going towards together. There were some old kind of reliables, such as the drums. The drums were fantastic and really sort of like effective in terms of the way we approached the control over the kit, the dexterity, they were like a metronome, incredibly tight with the performance itself, great sort of like control over the entire drum kit as well as the toms and everything else applicable. We even had some sort of like hand drum elements such as in She's Leaving Early, She's Working Late for a bit of a kind of like nightlife dance aesthetic. We were comfortable working rim shots and we needed to for more subtle hits there, and a bit of cowbell I think occasionally in certain parts. We even had some sort of tambourines or shakers in certain moments for like alternate overdubs of percussion, and it's just, yeah, the kit was well handled. We had little fills, but it was mostly about being supportive, I think, of what was going on with the main sort of like storytelling and the guitar and sort of key parts. Although the little ride hits at the start of Here We Are were fantastic for how they set the scene, evoked a sense of something that was going to happen next. The bass typically being supportive in the root notes and working well within their range there, even with chromatics or occasional parallels and stuff. Harmonically, it was still very, very good. And the guitar played a variety, the rhythm guitar, should I say, played a variety of different sort of like power chord or arpeggiated elements there, with occasional, again, parallel majors or minors. They just were kind of a twist in the tail there. And I like that we effortlessly navigated between major and minor keys there. We understood the buttons we could press to get away with those things compositionally from a songwriting perspective, and it's just really neat to have them work, because you can't take for granted that you can get your song or bass line to behave the way you want it. You have to kind of do some kind of fancy stuff sometimes, and we managed to pull that off here. Like the interval choices and qualities of chords are important. The keys were typically either kind of percussive pacing devices, or they might have played some sort of bluesy licks to kind of transfer between elements. And, you know, just like the guitar would call and respond with the vocalist sometimes, like in Here We Are near the end, the keys were more of a kind of a supportive, friendly kind of face there that was more sort of like palpable, I suppose, more a solid texture than the organs that were there mostly as a device to either warble and sort of tremolo and kind of have a bit of a pleasant sort of buzz or glow in it, but also I think it was to either provide a sense of additional spirituality to it, to kind of infer a different sort of mood there of a higher power, or to the romanticism that we either have or that has been lost. Thematically, I've already spoken about these per the different instruments, but we typically, if we used a major chord, if we used a minor chord, if we used sort of extensions of bluesy pentatonic elements in our solos and scaling, it was either to invoke the mood we're trying to discuss with our lyrics, or it was to either kind of like be a safe harbor for the listener or lead them by the nose. And I think that's the duality of songwriting, and both were done well. There were some moments where there were chords that were unexpected or transitions that were set, but we typically played kind of catchy, relatively accessible sort of main vocal lines on top of those chord progressions and across the variety of instruments. And the main sort of sections, like the choruses and the hooks per song, were memorable because of that. I think with She's Leaving Early, She's Working Late, we did switch things up a little bit with the way that we approached the sequence of those chords in one of the choruses, if I'm not mistaken. There was kind of a twist in the tail. But like that was just sensible considering the subject matter and the genre we're going on. And generally, again, the instrumental performance was nice and tight with not out of place, should I say. Really great, really solid stuff. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering is commercial grade. The vocals are well present in the mix, as well as the backings and mains. The guitar, bass, drums, keys, and organs, and any other sort of sub-layers were nicely niched within the frequency spectrum with no weird resonant frequencies, as well as the stereo field. The music surrounded you in the headphones. I like the guitars were double-tracked. I like that the drum kit explored and it was well presented. There's dynamic range, mostly from a compositional perspective, which is totally fine. I don't mind that at all. And it's nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting was handled. It sounds like a kind of like a recording from the 20th century. It has this kind of vintage nostalgia feel to it that I appreciate. A warmth that is welcome, especially considering the style of music that we're going for, that kind of classic, kind of like country rock ballad kind of format. There's no applicable constructive critique on my part. I think, as I mentioned before I went into this track, I just think it's just two really solid songs. And I think that they've just got it handled in terms of that. It's just finding an identity, because this is my general sort of thoughts from a listener's perspective. I just want to be able to hear this, and I think I can. When I hear the voice, I recognize it. They've got a distinctive timbre and texture, and that's an incredibly positive thing. And what's kind of brutal about the industry nowadays is that you kind of need that. You kind of need to have one thing that people will help to sort of remember you by, because like it's very difficult otherwise to be heard and be remembered. But just I think I'm also starting to sense patterns of like relationships and sort of connections, both like positive and negative, from Big Sexy's part. And it's just cool to have seen their journey and to be able to have heard it. So I wish them all the best. Thank you for watching my review of these two tracks from Big Sexy, titled She's Leaving Early, She's Working Late, as well as Here We Are, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and a Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands Out.